We'll be doing that draw later on and checking that and announcing the winner tonight at the dinner. Along with, there will be a quiz, so come along with all your... I suggest maybe a phone that you can Google pretty quickly on.
Wikipedia.
No, that's...
Do you think with a quiz, Jerry, we can have a little bit of a change of format that we all ask John a question?
Like that one.
I got a few farthing questions. The other thing, if you could give me a show of hands, who would like to come in the bus for dinner tomorrow night?
Somebody coming?
RSL.
It is.
That's a Jerry. 19.
There'll be another one, Jerry, my wife will come.
20. So 20, okay, well, we'll talk to the people upstairs and probably have to organise a couple of trips. Thanks for that.
Jerry, we're driving for something like
Okay. Well, you don't come in the bus.
that. Well, we don't want the bus.
Okay. All right. Our next speaker is well known to you all, Rudi Talmacs. Rudi's been a member of the ANS for about 10 years, collector for at least 50 years, 50 years young, I'd say. Rudi's interest are numismatic metals. He's a philosopher, and he's also lectured at Sydney University and the University of Western Sydney on ethics. His talk and presentation is on the early metal, high and late Renaissance. Thanks, Rudi. Thanks.
I'm going to wing it a little bit, simply because I've had a bit of difficulty with my computer, and I'm a little bit concerned that it may be compromised in such a way that it could even have influence here. John assures me that that's not a problem, but I'm kind of worried about these things.
Speak up a little bit, Rudi, please.
Okay, so I'm a little bit worried about, so I'm going to wing it a little bit more. Is there anybody here who can tell me what that metal is?
Bronze medal.
John Paleologus.
Sorry?
Paleologus.
That's right.
John the 8th Paleologus.
Yeah, last Byzantine, second one.
All right, so what you are looking at is what the scholars tell us is the first, definably first medal, which is the Renaissance medal, firstly. Secondly, no lesser an authority than the great Sir George Hill would consider the medal to be the definitive art form of the Renaissance. Okay, the definitive art form of the Renaissance. So we're looking at something which is totally extraordinary, firstly. Secondly, we've seen a lot of examples here. I'm not thinking about the more recent things, medals that John has shown us, but to look at the medieval medals, to look at the medals that go back, look at the coinage in particular that goes back, that in 1438, the coinage available is something that sits in your hands, and because millions were being manufactured by guys who were hammering, and I understand that the production rate is that they were able to do 30 in a minute, two-man team, 30 in a minute, bang, bang, bang. That's what was in the hands. This suddenly appeared, and this metal here was 103 to 104, because it's cast metal and a series of castings, and they're all a little bit there. 103 to, it's 104, 105, but of that size, millimetres in diameter, 10 centimetres. It did not look like a coin, it was not a rival to a coin, it did not look like it belonged in that family. This was a major work of art. Okay, so Now, can anybody tell me why on earth would you make the first and such an important medal of this chap? Why would you do that?
Second last Byzantine emperor.
Huh? You're not only the second last Byzantine emperor, Paleologus is the dynasty, and 12 years after he died, 13 years, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans. Now, the big significance is that in Florence, a team from Constantinople, led by the Emperor of Constantinople, that's who John Paleologus is, the Emperor of the of the Roman Empire. We heard earlier that the Roman Empire was this in continuity going back to the times of Julius Caesar and before. This continuous continuity in a sort of city formed by the Emperor Constantine. The real thing, in the context of Italy, there was the emergence of the awareness of the historical past and the Roman heritage of Italy at that time. There was the resumption in that awareness of the collection of coins. Reference, I think, was made to Petrarch this morning. Petrarch collected coins, and he collected Roman coins because they were evidence of the heritage. But here suddenly, firstly, it was in the Council of Basel, which ran into difficulties, moved over, I think, to Rimini or Ferrara or something, but over on the Italian east coast. Plague broke out, and then they repositioned to Florence. And the repositioning to Florence in 1438 was negotiated and facilitated by the great Cosimo de' Medici, father of Lorenzo il Magnifico. So 1438, they came over, and Lorenzo, because Lorenzo was not an aristocrat, you understand. Lorenzo was big business and banking, but he and the House of Medici were the bankers for the Pope in Rome and the big money of the Vatican. Cosimo could organise something in such a way that the outcome of the Council of Florence brought enormous prestige onto Florence, because in actual fact what happened there was the schism between the Eastern Church and the Western Church appeared to get resolved. They actually fixed the problem. The Emperor of Byzantium, who was not excommunicated, there was the Patriarch of the Eastern Church, who in 1055 was excommunicated, and in vice versa, excommunicated the Pope in the Vatican. Why? Because of the issue of the priesthood, who in the final working out who was the senior man, who could finally sign off on what the truth was. So, the Emperor of Byzantium, or the Emperor of Constantinople, showed up, and he showed up with the Patriarch of Constantinople. The Pope from the Vatican was in Florence. The Holy Roman Emperor came to Florence. Everybody who could apparently agree was in attendance, and Paleologus, John VIII, was the guiding force to fix the deal. Now, from the point of view of the millennium, prima facie, he was amongst the greatest men who lived in 1,000 years. The unfortunate, the great misfortune, was that when the Pope went back to Rome, and Paleologus, he died before getting back. But when the people got back to Constantinople, neither group could sell the deal to the people in power at home. The deal fell through. The consequence was that the allies that the Byzantine emperor needed to defend against the Ottomans the allies did not show up. Constantinople fell, and a sort of a real crisis, doctrinal crisis, showed up in Rome. Now, I've got to watch out for my time. It's already half gone.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
The key outcome was this: that the Byzantine entourage and group brought with them, in particular, Platon, the great Byzantine philosopher and scholar, and who actually enabled the Florentines and the West to again put their hands on the complete set of Plato, because they had very narrow Plato. As a consequence, they got the key to fully understand Augustine. All right? Now, this is the key, because when they got together and the two missing elements, or the two elements that were short of what was needed to illuminate the text, were all put together, they actually got a solution. I'm just, in a nutshell, I'll tell you what the solution is. The solution is for Neoplatonism, because the problem with Neoplatonism, and I'll put this question just very quickly, I've got enough time, we can have a bit of a sort of a self-revelation or self-declaration thing as well. Who here believes that they are possessors of a soul? Who here believes they are free? Can anybody here prepared to tell me what they think the essence of freedom is? So I don't want to hear capacity to choose in the supermarket. Sorry, what?
His wife's in Brisbane, he's free.
The problem with Neoplatonism,
Doing things with a clear conscience.
the problem with Platonism, and I'll give you sort of the Platonic analysis that underlies theology as such. What's the universe? Let's call the universe everything, always, everywhere.
Sounds
Good
good.
enough?
Yeah, sounds good.
Then I ask you the next question: where is God if you adhere to that belief? Where is God?
Everywhere.
If God's everywhere and the universe is everywhere, you are compelled, if you wish to be rational, to say that God is indwelling in the universe.
It's the
Okay?
universe. Yeah.
So if God is indwelling in the universe, and we are part of the universe, God is indwelling in us. And in our consciousness, the seat of that consciousness and the spring out of which our freedom emerges, then is our soul.
If you define the soul as that God within.
Eh? Well, not quite God within, the gift of God. Or some element, there's a lot to be thought about. Okay? Now, just so to get a sense of where we are going, the three greatest writers, I think I could succeed in making the case. The three greatest writers are Plato, Aristotle and Augustine. And Augustine, in terms of the literature generated, the thinking done, not only is Augustine one of the greatest of all talents that humanity has produced, but there's a vast literature that's been carefully looked after. Now, the writings of Augustine, however, and this is, you've got to sort of to look at the East and the West, the writings of Augustine were in Latin. He's the first Latin father. And in 400 AD, nobody translated Augustine into Greek. In Constantinople, everybody relied on the Greek fathers. Why would you move beyond them? You had the texts. You had there, and so they continued in their Greek tradition from the Greek fathers. Augustine wasn't there. Now, Augustine, however, solves the problem of how we can be free in this pantheism implied by Neoplatonism or Platonism. Because if God's everywhere, sort of how can we be free? God is all-knowing, and somehow or another we are God's puppets or little robots kidding ourselves about whether we are free. Consequently, we can't be moral, and that's a very serious issue. So, Augustine was bypassed. Now, I've got a copy of the King James Bible, and I looked at it very closely, and then I looked at the New International Version of 1871. And I tell you what, they do not say the same thing. If you want to drill down on what really are these people saying, they don't say the same thing. The Nicene Creed of 375, or whenever it was cast, does not say the same in Latin as it says in Greek.
Yeah.
And the big issue, however, I got
10 minutes.
10 minutes, that's okay.
Without questions.
The big issue was what actually is the Trinity, you know, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Now, Holy Ghost could be easily seen as the active principle of the divinity, generator of the creation. But where does the Son fit in? How can you look at that? So,
Next slide.
So, Augustine's theory of the soul, his explanation of the soul and the explanation of our freedom, illuminates the Trinity from a particularly Latin point of view. And the way to make it explicit is to include the phrase in the accepted translation, Latin translation of the Nicene Creed, the phrase filioque, of the Son. Filioque. And this filioque, the issue surrounding that, is the one that has produced this great schism between the Orthodox Church and the Latin Church. When things came to a head in 1054 and burst through to its resolution in 1055, mutual excommunication and the breakdown of the theological thing, in Rome it was concluded, because the Church, they are lawyers as well as the theologians, it was concluded that in Constantinople they were in error. The Church was no longer capable to take care and facilitate the salvation of the souls of all those people who relied upon it in the Byzantine Empire, in the Eastern Empire. On that legal basis, the Crusades could be founded. Okay? Now, understanding the filioque, the Father of the Son, I mean, Jesus has a soul, the soul is perfect, and the soul is imbued with the truth of the divinity. That's Jesus. That's rendered intelligible through Augustine. Okay, righto. This, oh yeah, thank you. So here we come. So this is why this man was so great. He actually got the deal together. Now, Pisanello is the great composer, author of this medal. And while we talk in terms of obverse and reverse, one should understand the Renaissance medal in terms of, also in that obverse, this is the impressa. This, because portraiture emerged in the Renaissance, portraiture of people. But the weakness of a painting not only is that it couldn't be reproduced, but it didn't tell you why the painting should be made. Why this person is important. Here's the great soldier, there's the reference to the soldier and whatever. Here, John worships the cross, but he worships the cross as a universal Christian, i.e. he worships Jesus as well as God. He no longer worships the icon up in the Hagia Sophia, which is the classic one that you see it in Syracuse, you see it in the churches in Malta. He worships, the deal was done, they actually accepted the whole thing. Can we go to the next one quickly then? Now, here, this picture, 1474-75, this is, scholars don't know who this person is. This is a photo I took in the Uffizi. He holds this great medal. This is a Pisanello medal, but it's not a painting of the medal. What Botticelli, the great Alessandro Botticelli, has, this is stucco. He's actually had his hands on the medal. He has produced a subtle plaster cast of it. It's put on there and it's gilded. This is Cosimo the Elder Medici. The prestige of the medal, it just took the world by storm. Can we have the next one, please? This, Spinelli's another big name. Here again, he is holding the medal. This is, so this was, this is the frontispiece of Hill's book on the art medals, but of the artists as great men. Those worthy of an impressa, because the Italy was flooded with medals of the Condottieri, not all of whom were people we would consider wholesome. Can we go to the next one? Now, move forward 100 years, and we see here, some will recognise the emblem of Corinth. This is Benvenuto Cellini. This is 100 years later. Cellini knows his coins. He knows his history, numismatic history. Cardinal Bembo. Pietro Bembo. Who's Bembo? Bembo is the great linguist who organised the grammar of the Tuscan language. He not only wrote poems and whatever as well, and you see in some works of lesser scholarship that they are, he's just a minor poet or something. He's not only the orderer of the Tuscan grammar, which, and this is the dialect in Italy deemed for you the finest expression of Italian language. But not only that, he's organised a way of documenting the madrigal, which arose at that time, the Italian madrigal, ordering that madrigal, and indeed the ordering system and the notational system of the traditional madrigals is called the Bembo. Can we have the next medal, please? So, I just want to talk about the conclusion, because 1439 represents the start of the Renaissance medal. I mean, that tradition does continue, but in a sense you could see the conclusion of it. Does anybody know who we are looking at here? This is the great Varane, the great medalist. Now, and here is Louis XIV, the boy. It was considered greatly to the development of the Dauphin that he should be also taught the practicalities connected with one form of the arts, and given that his grandmother was the Medici and connected with all this other stuff with the medals as we've just been looking at, it was decided that Varane would be he would be sort of apprentice, and he spent a bit of time day in, day out to learn the practical realities of natural logic, let's say, and to his capabilities. So, if we could move to the next one there. So here's Louis 30 years later. And in a sense, if we saw what the first Renaissance medal, this we see in many ways the first medal that's sort of pinched off the Renaissance medal concept, all its modes, all its ways, but it ceased to be the Renaissance medal because, can we see the next one? This is why he's called the Sun King. This is the medal that shows him, because the reverses, the impresses, were always put in allegorical form. Here he is, there's the sun. Why is the sun there? That his ancestor is Hercules. 3 people in the history of our ancient world were born, apparently, by agency of the divinity. Alexander the Great, Hercules, Jesus Christ. Okay? And the sun, the spirit, the Ra of Ammon, the Ra, the Oomph, has to do with sort of the Vertu, the spiritual power. So there, this is by allegory, Louis XIV is the agent or the bearer of the spirit of the divinity, divine right of kings and all of that type of stuff. Now, down there in my, can I show you just, next one please. This is Cardinal Mazarin. If you get the thing in your hands, because like I say, the Renaissance medal was intended to be held in the hand, not to be looked at in pictures you actually held it in the hand, and so you had the close association with John Paleologus. You actually were close, you could look at the image of the man. Mazarin composed this, and if we go to the next one, it's a terrific, the medal is fantastic, and everybody is welcome to hold it in their hand and examine it without doing damage to it, because I'm relying on it in my extreme old age. The allegory here, of course, is Hercules, the Bourbon, Louis XIV as a boy not yet ready to be king, and Atlas holding up the sky. Now I think it's the 11th trial of Hercules, in which Hercules needs to gather a difficult task. He needs to get the apples, the golden apples sort of thing, which are guarded by the Hesperides, who are the daughters of Atlas. He goes, Atlas tells him, can you hold the sky up? Hold the sky up for me, and I'll go and get it. I'll talk to the daughters and I'll get the apples for you. So he comes back with the apples, but then he says, you know what, Hercules, I've had enough of holding the sky up. Why don't you keep doing it? But for a brief moment, Atlas thinks, oh gee, we're such and such. And Hercules quickly tells him, quick, hold this and I'll get it for you. And then Atlas has got the thing back on his shoulders, and Hercules says, one dirty trick deserves another. Okay? But he succeeds and is able to take the apples away. So, the essence, I didn't get a chance to sort of properly deal with all of that, but it is Augustine, because Augustine does the analysis not only of the problem of Neoplatonism, but Augustus asks the question, why what was the error by Adam in receiving the apple? That he succumbed to temptation. The human soul, by succumbing to temptation, moves away from its form in which the divinity has shown the truth. It moves away from that. And in the succumbing to temptation, and then there's a categorisation of the 7 deadly sins, which are the essence of all the errors, that man moves away. One's virtu, we translate it as virtue, but it's the power and aspiration for global excellence. That power is also, at the same time, the return to the truth imparted to us through the divinity in our souls. So there you go.
We're just on time. We'll take one quick question, then we'll go on. If not ready, John, would you like to come? Yes, of course.
But nobody dares ask me a question on such a complicated and deep issue.
We don't have another 4 hours. Sorry.
Really, we're
Do it over dinner.
overwhelmed with your passion for telling us this. And thank you.
Thanks, Rudi. Well, that's the last of our formal talks. We've got some time on, if you have a look at the program, where we have members that would like to speak on their displays, if they've not covered them in their talks. I know Merve Meads has got some. If you'd like to come up and explain that, and also make sure you got your votes in, because we're going to do that. Tomorrow we start at 9. At 8:30 there will be a council meeting.
Shouldn't take it that long.
Won't take too long. And once again, remind you, they did it tonight, 6:30, and they want us sitting down by 7. Merve. Everyone knows Merve Meads, he's from Over Square.
Very good. Listen, Mike's topic tonight, this afternoon, is on the Australian $5 note. Now, the Australian $5 note, I've got notes and that over there. There's not every note there. There's a couple of star notes short. That's how it goes. But,
Only a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
But the rest of them is from the first time, because of course when they turned into decimal currency, the $5 note in '66 wasn't invented. They invented it in 1967. I'm not into who's on what, who's doing what, or whatever the case may be, but on that particular signature, I got to sort of have a bit of a plug from my own area. There's on the '67 one, on the '66 one was Coombs and Wilson. I don't know where any of them come from, but in '67 there was Coombs and Randall. Well, Randall, he actually comes from the Redlands down near Brisbane. He was a farmer. He was only in power for 12 months, but his notes and that are very hard to come by because he was only in power for 12 months. But, and of course the early notes, like everything else, they had Commonwealth of Australia written across the top of them, and then that was the, anyway, it come down, well, you can't collect every year, you can collect every signature, but you can't collect every year because some years they didn't even print these notes. For instance, 67 was Coombs and Randall, 68 there was none made, and 69 was Phillips and Randall. In all these notes, in the early notes like that, they had Commonwealth of Australia written across the top of them. Now that that's in the paper ones. But from the last one was had Commonwealth of Australia in them was in 1974. It had Phillips and Wheeler. Now in the sequence of Phillips and Wheeler, they had on these particular notes, they had side threads and centre threads in them. That was a strip that was run down either the side through the note, but it was either on the side of the note. Well, they say the side, it'll be about that far in on the side one, and they had one through the centre, which is about halfway along the note. So those two there are a bit different. The next one after that, 1975, they never made any. By this time, they've taken the Commonwealth of Australia off. They just put Australia on them. The first one was Knight and Wheeler with Australia on. In 77 there was none made. In 78 there was none made. In 79 there was Knight and Stone, which the signatures on the notes and that, they're from the Reserve Bank of Australia and the
Secretary of the Treasury.
Secretary of the Treasury. They're the two signatures that go on notes, and that's when the government's when the government changes or whatever the case may be, they change too, so the signatures on the notes change. So that's how they go. Now, for Australian notes, we come down, 80 there was none made, 81 there was none made, 82 there was none made. In 1983 we had Johnson and Stone. They were the signatures on the notes at the time. Though once again, that's just how it goes. In 1984 there was none made. In 1985 Johnson and Fraser had their signatures on the paper $5 note. And then 86 there was none, 87 there was none, 88 there was none, 89 there was none. And in 1990 we come up to Fraser and Higgins. He's another bloke. They weren't in power. I couldn't tell you which government it was, but they were in power. They weren't in power very long either. They take a bit of finding those that particular note with that signature on it. Then it comes down to McFarlane and Evans. That was in 96. 97 there was none made. 98 it was McFarlane and Evans. And in 99 there was none made. So that fulfills the list of the signatures and that sort of stuff on the old paper note. Well, from that they've changed from paper notes to polymer notes, and over there I've got every one of the different signatures in the polymer notes. The first ones that come out, they're a different colour to what we've got at the present time. The first ones that come out, they were like a bluey grey colour, the first polymer notes. And so that was the first one. The second one they made was it was a similar colour, but the numbers in them was actually made, they painted them on green. The numbers on the second polymer note were green numbers. They weren't black like everything else had, but this particular one had the green numbers on them. And that was McFarlane and Evans. The next one was, that was 2001. 2002 we had McFarlane and Henry. 2003 McFarlane and Henry. 2004 none made. 2005 McFarlane and Henry. 2006 McFarlane and Henry. 2007 Stevens and Henry. And 2008 was Stevens and Henry again. From then they've had a pretty quiet time. There was none made in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012 they made some. I can't off the top of my head think of the signatures that are on 2012. The 2012 and 2013 that I'm not too sure of. 2014 there was none. 2015 they did bring some polymer notes out in 2015. Once again I can't think of them numbers either, but and then in 2016 we had Stevens and Fraser. Now Stevens and Fraser, they were the polymer notes that was the average run of the mill. In 2016 they invented one. They invented a note, a polymer note that's got like a clear window down through the middle of it. And as far as I believe, I don't know whether I'm right, but as far as I believe, Australia's sort of ahead in all these polymer notes, what they can do and what they can't do. They sell their things overseas. But just the other week, I was watching TV and I was watching a thing on Canada. And anyway, the story wasn't about notes, it was about Canada. But it had, the Canadian note was very similar to our $10 note, exactly, just about to the point. So, and the present signature, Stevens and Fraser, is still what we're using today in 2018. So that gives you a rundown on our Australian $5 notes, and I hope I haven't bored you too much. Thank you very much.
Anyone else got any? So Stephen's got a little thing. You want to do that? Just going to start.
Yeah, okay. I don't have a formal display, but I did bring along this medal. I'm the volunteer for a missionary charity. I'm the coin person. Whenever somebody donates coins to them, it's my job to sell them or otherwise dispose of them to try to make money for the charity. Earlier this year I got a collection in. There wasn't too much to write home about in the collection. There was a bunch of South African, Southern Rhodesia coins in it. And a couple of medals, just a usual, school child, 1950s medals and that sort of thing, as well as this one, Parramatta 150th Celebrations Souvenir, 1938. It's not listed in colour, it's a little aluminium piece, and apparently nobody has ever heard of these things. I was hoping Les would be here to pick his brain on it. But if there are if anyone's ever seen one of these before, please let me know. I'm not the only one. It's uniface. There's nothing on the other side. I don't know if it was sold as a key ring or something like that. It's obviously came with a big hole in it. But it's obviously a commemorative thing that should be noted in the numismatic journals. I just thought it was interesting that the only example of this turns up in a collection in Queensland.
Looks like it should be from Venice, doesn't it?
Of course, the imagery on it, that's the old bridge in Parramatta. I think it's the second bridge on that site, dating from the late 1800s. And of course the Aboriginal spearfishing for eels underneath is the symbol of the city of Parramatta. Yeah, that's all I know about it. Now, obviously, it says souvenir. Presumably, it was sold as a souvenir at the 150th celebrations. But there should be more than one of them. I'm just surprised.
It's aluminium.
Aluminium, yeah.
Is it the size of a rolled cent?
It looks about the size of a rolled halfpenny, if such a thing existed. But I have it here if anyone wants to.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Well, this.
Pass around if you want.
Interesting piece. Anybody want to have a look?
Yes.
I've already talked to John about it, being the rolled coin expert. He says that, as far as he's aware, no rolled penny machines were in Australia before 1988, and the Expo 88 ones. So if it was, somebody brought it here, made one and then took it back to wherever it is they came from. I don't know. If anyone has any other ideas or opinions on it, please feel free to. I'm happy to. I did a little write-up on it in the Q&S magazine earlier this year when I got it. I'm happy to forward that to the ANS for publication.
Yes.
If you want.
Yes, that'd be good.
Could be a prototype that never went any further.
Might be like
What's it doing in this guy's collection?
It must
Might be like the
go back
Parramatta
to
football league team. Could be like the Parramatta league team. They're not winning much. Anyway, thanks, Stephen. Does anyone got questions on it? Please have a look at it and help Stephen identify it.
No idea.
Pete.
It's not about this piece, but you said that you had get foreign coins from a charity. Are these come out of collections or just in change, do you think?
It seems to be just sort of, the type of coin, in this collection, it was just the type of coins that you might bring home if you'd lived there for a couple of months.
Right.
And you were, I'm pretty sure it was the same collection. This guy had a collection of basically a solid run of Southern Rhodesia and Rhodesia and Rhodesian Nyasaland sort of coins, every denomination, every date, some multiples. I have a complete collection of Southern Rhodesia now, that's why I put a display of Southern Rhodesia on at the last Ender show up in Brisbane. Yeah, that's all I know.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. Anyone else got anything else?
My display really relates to what I talked about, but I thought I'd explain a couple of things to you. The display down there has 2 gold coins on it, which are the coins of Justinian the first and second type, but the other examples there's 10 examples there on display of the large follis pieces. They vary in years, but you'll see they gradually get smaller. But the middle coin, the first coin that's copper up there, is an interesting one. It's the one that's the joint reign of Justin and Justinian the First. And that's probably one of the finest examples that exists. They're horrible coins, they're terribly hard to read, but this has a very clear ethic of both names on it. Now the other things I want to mention too, besides the book which I've already mentioned to you about, there are 2 books there which are fascinating. Prue Morton Fitz, I think those coins that you got came from Prue, her husband's collection, did they not? The Anglo-Saxon pieces, the Skeeter. I think they might have come from. Anyhow, her husband, she collects Byzantine coins. This is a husband and wife team, a bit like Judith and David. But he collected English gold coins, and that's where his collection of English gold coins came from. And I think the gold Theismer piece that you had there was one of his. I had dinner with them one day, or lunch with them, and they were very interesting. But she wrote this book on Byzantine coins. Now, it's pretty interesting to look at because you'll find that you can learn anything you want to know about Byzantine coins in a little booklet like this that she wrote. She's president of a society I belong to, which is a business study. I get the membership card. So one of the joint things we have, we're meeting once a year in New York, and it goes for about an hour. There's a guest speaker, generally, and it's quite interesting. Then we pay $10 for our annual subscription, which means that if you come to lunch with us, you get the $10 back so you can buy your lunch. So one of those societies you pay for, but yet you get your money back. The other book I want to point out to you, I brought along, there are many, many hundreds of books on Byzantine coins. Everyone's probably heard about Dunbarton's collection, which is a series of books about this long on the shelf. I've got 2 sets of those, so I'll show you how keen I am. But there are other books too, besides Sears' general book, and there's a lot of ones by Whiting, and and so they go on. But this is a book that was originally published in German, but now being put in English, and this is a collection of coins that's compiled by a man called Hahn, and he wrote it in English, and this time it's been covered. The Money of the Byzantine Empire, or the Incipient Byzantine Empire, and this comes in several volumes. The 3rd volume, unfortunately, has never been translated. It's in German, so I have to use a German to translate that, but it only goes as far as Leader 3rd. But it lists every known variety as known to exist, and private collections if it hasn't, and illustrates the types and varieties. So it's a very useful book on Byzantine coins. You're welcome to have a look at them. I'll have them down there for you. Thank you.
Jerry, were you talking about our displays or something?
I think
Yeah.
that's what it's about, yeah.
No, if you don't cover, if it's covered in the speech, we talk tomorrow. That's fine. But,
If I may, have we got time?
yeah.
I joined the Postal Order Society. I joined the Postal Order Society in England in the 1980s when it was first formed, and you know, being a member fairly distant, I've always been rewarded by them. They're only a small membership, probably about 100, and to that end. And this is a plug for trying to generate some guys to put their hand up and take part in the society.
You don't have to stand in the front.
No, I want to show things off here.
I'll bring him back to the front and show us.
Oh, I'll take the things down with me. I'll work something out.
Don't want to break my neck turning around.
Poor Nick. So anyway, where was I? Postal Order Society.
Yeah.
Yeah. Members putting their hands up to do some chores, you know, it really is needed. And this guy, Mal Tedds, he'd been our editor since the 80s and put out some 122 journals. So he decided to retire, and so, not that I really needed the work, but I decided to take over. I put my hand up and volunteered to be editor for it. So we've brought out from 123 to, I think I'm working on 128 at the moment. It's a reward, you know, some people said to me, what did you take that on for? You're mad, you know. But in this day and age with the computers, the way it works out, it becomes very rewarding talking and learning about other guys' collecting needs. So also to that end, just another little suggestion, is that it's a great pity that some people don't think, if they've accumulated a lot of money and they've had a lot of enjoyment out of these societies, that they don't think of, when they pass on, giving a little bit to the societies. Because we were very lucky with one of our members in America who passed on, and he left us about £35,000. So we've got tons of funds. And what we do now is we issue 4 journals a year. We help members with publication costs. We've given other mementos out, and it's basically a $20 joining fee and no annual fees. And I understand, you know, Jim Noble's wrapped in his membership because the envelopes that bring the journal out to you have got English stamps on them that haven't been cancelled. So, you know, there's another collector in the room that seems to get hold of the stamps, you know, or I'm told he does anyway. The other thing is the Rennies managed to, I'll talk about that tomorrow, but I managed to get postal notes finally into Rennies after something like 60 years of Rennies, convinced them to, they're worthwhile having in. Whereas Greg McDonald over a beer or two said that I had to come up with about $1,800 to get them in his magazine, in his catalogue. Or Mick Fort Ronald has said, yes, very interesting, Ross, very interesting. So I'll see where we get to there. The other thing I've got on display very quickly is I was last weekend down at the IBNS conference, and we've got a very flamboyant member and from Melbourne, Stephen Pryor. And Stephen just turned 60, so he brought out his own banknotes. And they run things pretty smoothly, and they have an auction too. And it turns out, it was the first conference I'd attended with the IBNS, but it turns out that all the money goes to running the conference. So Stephen donated a number of these, and I managed to get hold of one of his banknotes, which is quite, you had a young version of him and an old version. And there's a guy in Goulburn who actually organises all the printing of them and that. So that was another item. And then the other item I've got is Carol's latest acquisition from the Sydney Royal this year for a quilt. And I might talk about that a little bit tomorrow too, because it can involve a bit of barter.
Ross, there's a rumour around that postal notes were invented by the Queensland Postal Service. Is that correct?
Tomorrow I'll tell you why I collect postal notes.
Thanks, Ross. I think it's 5 o'clock. I think we'll call it a close for the day, and look forward to catching up with you all this evening.
6:30 for 7 dinner.
Yeah, they want us sitting there for 7, because otherwise they might kick us out by midnight or something.
Sure it's not 8?
They got to late or 9 because that's 9 on that other thing.
I can't remember last time we were there quite late.